Hey gang, this week's episode is brought to you by oldschoolshirts.com. Hey, check them out. You like defunct teams and leagues and t-shirt form? Well, you'll find them there, but a whole bunch of other stuff too. Do you remember a radio station of the past or perhaps a mall that you used to go to? All kinds of great cultural and sports memories can be found at the great folks at oldschoolshirts.com. Promo code GOODSEATS for 10% off all of your purchases. And now, here's our show.
The Stoppers beating the Strikers 2-1. The club then hit the road, and last Sunday at the Astrodome in Houston, Texas, Gene Duchateau registered his second shutout in 3 games, a 1-0 Stopper victory. Charlie Marasco the lone goal. Then it was on to Tampa Bay on Wednesday night. Tampa Bay taking a 1-0 victory over the Stoppers, but more important than the loss was the loss of the services of Jeff Wegerle and some hurts to other players. Well, this afternoon from Lockhart Stadium in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, it's Oakland Stopper Soccer, brought to you in part by your Bay Area Chrysler Plymouth dealers, who bring you a new horizon in soccer and a new horizon for America. And by the professionals of Miracle Auto Painting, offering high quality at moderate costs in automobile painting and body repair, with over 40 locations. Hello, everybody. I'm Art Eckman along with Jack Hyde, and we're down at the floor of Lockhart Stadium right now, awaiting the arrival of both clubs, the Strikers and the Stoppers. It should be an important game for both teams in that the Strikers have to keep a home field advantage going. They've done a great job on their home field, but they have had a hard time on opposing fields like Oakland Coliseum.
Yeah, for sure. They've been losing on the road, Art. I think they haven't won a game on the road yet, but they're very, very strong at home here. They're 7-1, and we're trying to break that record now.
The Strikers don't have a very impressive record, but they're only 5 points out of first place.
They are, and I tell you, the most important thing tonight is that the Oakland Stompers get a win, because then it puts the icing on the cake and everybody goes home very happy, and it makes a very enjoyable trip with 2 wins.
It's been a very long road trip for the Oakland Stompers time-wise, in that we've had a lot of days and only 3 games in that time.
Yeah, it has, but we've managed to fill the time in between time, and I think it's been very good for the club, because we've seen a lot of players come together, and a lot of personalities develop a little bit more, and also a little bit of comradeship, and that helps on the field, Art.
The one disadvantage, of course, the numerous injuries. Shep Messing falling down on the AstroTurf right in a crease of the AstroTurf, spraining an ankle. That took him out of the Tampa Bay game, and also a very rough Tampa Bay game.
Yeah, definitely. Very rough Tampa Bay game, and but you don't forget that we have Gene Duchateau, who played in goal that night, and there was just the 1 goal that went through. And if you look, we've let in 1 goal, and we've scored 1 goal on this away trip so far. So tonight, Ken Bracewell gave a very stern talking to the team and said, let's have some more goals, fellas, and hopefully we can get a few more tonight.
Welcome to Good Seats Still Available, a curious little podcast devoted to exploring what used to be in professional sports. Here's your host, Tim Hanlon.
Well, all right, let's put your hands together for your Oakland Stompers. How are you, everybody? It's Tim Hanlon. It is Good Seats Still Available, the curious little podcast that is devoted to what used to be in professional sports. Thanks for finding us, and happy to have you along for this week's ride. Now, you're going to say, Tim, wait a minute. We've talked about the San Jose earthquakes quite a bit over this show, in particular over the holidays with our pal Johnny Moore. He an earthquakes legend there in the NASL back in the day, and a couple of conversations with the great Gary Singh and some of his books about the history of that franchise, and a couple of other nibbles. Crazy George Henderson, for example, a mainstay at earthquakes games, both versions of the team, past and present, etc. And of course, the Earthquakes were one of the seminal franchises in the NASL, and we love to discuss anytime we can to learn more things about that team, and by extension, the league itself that it played in, mostly the NASL, a little MISL, if you're looking at your asterisks properly on your Wikipedia page. But brand new book came out by our new pal, Eric Gouldsberry, who's our guest this week. That just had to sort of interrupt our separation, shall we say. And we wanted to bring this to you as soon as we could, because it just came out in January, and we're only able to get this episode out to you now. It is called Our Life and Times with the Earthquakes, and images and memories from the glory days of San Jose's original pro soccer team. And it is a joy to behold. It is designed with love and character. Eric's father was the unofficial photographer for the Earthquakes for a bunch of years, mostly a labor of love. And the Oakland Stompers, yes, I'm calling it back finally, were part of that story. You cannot really talk about the Stompers, the one-year wonder in 1978 in the NASL, without understanding the story of the San Jose Earthquakes franchise from 1974 onward. That was frankly part of the origin story of the Stompers. A guy by the name of Dick Berg, who we've talked about on this show previously, general manager for the Stompers, but was perhaps the linchpin for the San Jose Earthquakes becoming an expansion franchise with the NASL back before it was a thing in 1974 and putting San Jose on the professional sports map for all intents and purposes. As we get into the story and some other layers of the Earthquakes saga with Eric coming up in a couple of minutes, you'll get an understanding that Mr. Berg and others, Milan Mandaric, for example, who's also part of the Earthquake story, came into the idea of an expansion franchise yet again in 1978 across the bay in the relatively newer and more expansive Oakland Alameda County Coliseum for its franchise debut in 1978. Now, it only lasted a year, and that was a broadcast there that you heard, a home broadcast of an away game, a lengthy road trip between the Stompers and the Fort Lauderdale Strikers. Art Ekman and Jack Hyde on the call. I want to say it was KTVU TV here in the Bay Area, Oakland/San Francisco. I'm not positive of that, but you Bay Area fans of both of these teams and television there can correct me if I'm wrong. And that was from June 10th, 1978. The Stompers really didn't have a hell of a run. They went 12-18. They were out of playoff contention. Shep Messing, for 1 year, got swept away from the Cosmos off of that 1977 NASL championship high and was arguably the star of that team. And then went back to the East Coast to become another pioneer with the advent of the New York Arrows and the Major Indoor Soccer League. But we digress as we talk about the Bay Area and pro soccer. And this is largely a story about the San Jose Earthquakes. But any excuse we could find to shoehorn in a clip featuring the Oakland Stompers, well, this was it. And we did that so we could check that box. But the Stompers story will come up in this chat with Eric. And again, I highly encourage it. This is probably the most I can't describe it. I just love this book. It's probably the most standout book I think I've seen in the last year and a half. And we see a lot of them, friends. And it's I would call it, it's not quite a coffee table book because it's not that large, but it's also not quite a sort of a heavy read either. It's largely picture oriented and it's graphically designed with expertise. And there's a reason for that because Eric Gouldsberry was an economics professor of mine at business school. I digress on that front too. It's a senior moment. Eric Gouldsberry is a graphic designer by trade, and it's clear that his skills are well developed in this book. And using his father's photography from back in the day, this book, Our Life and Times with the Earthquakes, Images and Memories from the Glory Days of San Jose's Original Pro Soccer Team. It is a paperback book. It is published directly by Eric, and it puts some of these professional publishers to shame. It is a wonderful book. And if you're a fan, not only of the Earthquakes or even the Stompers, but of the NASL back in the day or pro soccer back in the day generally, you will see all the players, all the visitors that came to Spartan Stadium back in the day, in addition to just a wealth of well-presented material, both visually as well as with words and various ephemera, soccer ticket stubs, etc., and pictures of programs and all that kind of stuff from the Earthquakes in this book. I highly recommend you get it. You will be proverbially glad you did. And, of course, the best way, the quickest way, and the cheapest way to get it is to go to our website at goodseatsstillavailable.com and search up this episode with Eric Gouldsberry. And that's episode, I think, what are we up to now? 383? Let's go with that. And you'll find a couple of convenient links that will take you to this gorgeous paperback book that you will love and cherish. And trust me on this one, this is a must-have for your collection. If you're a fan of any of those things and above, you will enjoy it tremendously, even if you didn't care for the earthquakes specifically, as I might not have as a Cosmos fan. But again, that's just me getting in the way. But all right, let's not get in the way any further. Here's our great conversation we had with Eric. I want to say it was about 3 or 4 weeks ago. Only able to get it to you now. I hope you enjoyed as much as I did. Please sit back and listen up. I'm not from the Bay Area, but as we get into our little chat here, what is it about that team? And just even forget about Major League Soccer's version. What is it about this Earthquakes team from the 1970s and 1980s that people remember so fondly and so deeply, like it almost never left, even when it came back?
Yeah, I think a couple things. I think it was the pageantry of the whole Earthquakes experience. It wasn't just the players on the field. It was Crazy George. It was the shakers, the cheerleaders. It was all the soccer balls, the skippy balls being thrown in the stands. It was the halftime show. It was the pregame show. It was the tailgating out in the grass parking lot outside of Spartan Stadium. And it was the stadium itself. It was, as I refer to it, it's kind of like the Ibbot's Field of soccer, because it was just this very tight and closed, beautiful place. It was a great place to watch soccer. And the players didn't like it so much, at least, especially the visiting players, but even some of the Earthquakes wish they had a little more sideline room. Gabble Gabrick, the player coach for the Quakes, famously couldn't slow themselves down once and hit into the wall. And, we all joked that, Gabble Gabrick thus became the first player to attempt to expand Spartan Stadium. So there was the pageantry, but also too, it was the community aspect. And I think a lot of that was driven by the marketing of the Earthquakes. Dick Berg, when he came on board, he and Johnny Moore and Milan Mandrich, the original owner of the Quakes, Johnny Moore being not just a player, but assistant general manager at first, before he became a full-on general manager. They did a terrific job of kind of getting the community involved. And, there was a lot of interest before the very first game. And for me, I didn't know too much about the Earthquakes before they got started, or before they played their first game. I just found out about it literally like a week before. I don't know how I missed out on all the preseason rumbling that was going on about, hey, do you know what they're doing with this team and all the wonderful promotions they're doing and so forth. I had thought that there had been 15,000 people that showed up to the very first game in 1974, because obviously it's pro soccer in San Jose, and pro sports in San Jose was something unheard of at the time. Everybody was up in San Francisco and Oakland. But I thought a lot of them were coming out to see Kyle Rudd Jr. because we were taking on the Dallas Tornado, and Kyle Rudd Jr., a big name at the time. He was the face of soccer before Pele came along, because he had made a household name of himself on the ABC Superstars competition. But we were there, and again, to experience the whole thing, it was just so much fun. We just had to keep going again and again, and we got season tickets after about a third of the way through the season, and we kept those tickets all the way through to the very last season.
Well, describe San Jose back then. Now, I'm assuming you were a kid back then, right?
Correct.
Okay, so from what you remember growing up in that area, can you scene set a little bit for folks who are kind of geographically unaware of the Bay Area and where San Jose sits, and frankly, how and why a burgeoning, was it a suburb? Was it a regional? Was it a city by then per se? Certainly in the shadow of the two bigger cities up across the Bay, right? The idea of San Jose, little old San Jose, getting a professional sports franchise of any type, right, I was unheard of, but it was certainly eyebrow raising, and was certainly a I guess, a roll of the dice by all involved.
Yeah, San Jose. I moved to San Jose in 1969. I was 6 years old, and uh, I still live here. I've been here for, however, do the math, whatever, over 50 years. Um, but at that time, when the earthquakes came along 5 years later, San Jose was fast growing. I mean, the population of San Jose in 1960 was 200,000. It doubled by 1970. Um, and now it's over 1 million. But so San Jose, going way back, was an agricultural paradise. It was, a lot of different types of agriculture. Prunes apparently were the big deal back in the day. In fact, there was a college bowl game that didn't last very long, way back 30s and 40s, that was played at Spartan Stadium. It was called the Prune Bowl. And so there was that. But the city planners, people back in the 50s, post-war, had a really good idea that San Jose was going to become a big metropolis at some point, and all these fields are going to go away, and you're going to get all the suburbia. So they did a really good job planning out all these expressways and freeways, which probably, when they were built, just probably looked weird because they were basically going through all these agricultural fields, these 4-6 lane highways. With probably not a lot of traffic. Well, that foresight has served the city well now. But yeah, San Jose, by the time the earthquakes came along, was kind of characterized as a city that was too big to be a suburb, but kind of too small. Well, not too small. It was actually almost as big as San Francisco and Oakland population-wise, but too close to those two cities to be kind of get its own identity. And not helping was the fact that, there wasn't a lot of pop cultural, sports cultural connections with the city, outside of, Dionne Warwick's singing, do you know the way to San Jose? Which most people said, no, I don't know the way to San Jose. But, San Francisco had, obviously it was San Francisco. And then on top of that, you started getting sports teams there with the Giants and the 49ers. And then Oakland, which, Gertrude Stein famously once said of Oakland, there is no there. Well, then the Coliseum complex was built, and you have the A's, the Raiders, the Warriors, the Golden Seals, the National Hockey League team that didn't last very long there. So they had identity. And then when the earthquake got started in 1974, yeah, you're right. It was just totally this. It was this out of left field in a sense, because San Jose's getting a team, and we had minor league baseball, and still do, and that was about as good as it got for pro sports in San Jose. And I think there was a big hunger among the residents. The thing here about San Jose is it began to become this high tech, Shangri-La, if you will. It started in the 60s, but it really started to become something in the 70s. And from that, the area really grew. So you not only had a lot of people here in San Jose, but you had a lot of people who were fairly wealthy. I don't want to say everybody's rich, but the income level was pretty good. And so there was definitely something that could be tapped into if you had a sports team here. And of course, the luxury of not having to drive 15 miles north to Candlestick Park or the Coliseum also played well into helping the earthquakes become an early success.
How were you brought into this sort of earthquakes family? Because this book, which is just a treasure, I loved every page of it. It is so well done in terms of the black and white photography, and even the color inserts of various programs and game tickets and that kind of stuff. This feels like it was done by a fan, and professionally so. Your father was a photographer by trade, right?
He was actually into high tech. Photography was a hobby for him. So,
got it. Interesting. Because you look at these pictures and you would say, this looks like the official team photographer.
Well, he was kind of the unofficial team photographer. I don't know if the earthquakes ever had an official photographer per se. I guess if there was anybody who was, it was him, at least in the early years. Yeah, he had been kind of moonlighting as photographer, videographer more than anything else, taking game footage of our old Pop Warner teams that me and my brothers played on in the early '70s, and then he was also shooting game footage for Saratoga High School football, where we all went to high school. A huge high school football program at the time there. Um, and I think word started to get around that he was somebody who could be could be employed doing other types of sports. The 49ers invited him. I think there was a connection there with Don Heinrich, who was who's father of a kid who was I went to high school with. But he was also doing uh, analysis broadcasting for the 49ers on the radio. So he invited him up and he did some photography and video for a couple 49er games in the '70s, early '70s, but at the same time the earthquake started. But he got involved in the earthquakes. Some of the earthquakes must have found out. I don't know exactly who. I wish I can get a time machine and go back and talk to my father about the genesis of this whole thing. Um, But he was invited when the Earthquakes were doing right before their second season. They did the indoor tournament, and it was held at the Cow Palace, south of San Francisco. And um, he was invited to do video footage, or asked to do video footage of this soccer training video that involved some Earthquakes players, and they got a kid. Actually, it was a classmate of mine at Saratoga, Jeff Arriaga. You may know it. Arriaga is a big name in Stanford. His father helped build half the campus, apparently. Anyway, so he went up there and he did this video training. Shot the video. And it was a lot of fun. I actually got to go out in the field and be with Jeff, kick the ball around, and with some of the other players as well.
And sorry, this was before they actually took the field outdoors, right? They kind of do this
No.
thing. Oh, was this after?
No, this was '74 was their first year outdoors. '75 was their second season, and that was when they did the indoor tournament before the second outdoor season. No problem. And so yeah, that was the first time that he was involved with the earthquakes. And then as a result of that, he was asked to go to Spartan Stadium during one of their practices and take color photos of each of the players. And those pictures I have in the book at the introduction of the player section that's in the book. They're the only color photos in the book that he ever shot. Everything else is in black and white. And so from there, he started doing more actual game footage or game photography of the earthquakes, and continued '75 all the way through 1978. He also took pictures of the practice, took pictures of some of the team functions, awards presentations, get-togethers with youth soccer and so forth. So he was kind of behind the scenes too. So it's a very revealing look of the earthquakes at that time, not just on the field but off it. And of course, he did a lot of the photos of again, of the pageantry, as I like to call it, with Crazy George, all his introductions, which was always fun to behold, the fans, the shakers, and so forth. So yeah, he did a really good job of documenting what I think is the peak years of the earthquakes, the late '70s, and from there, it was so magical to just look at all these pictures years later. And at some point, I was planning on doing a book on the earthquakes as early as the '90s, using his pictures. And just one reason or another, never got around to it. And then in the last 10 years, I just said, to my dad, he was still around. He died in 2019, but I can, I'd love to get my hands on these negatives and scan them all and make a book out of it and just go with it. And then that's what happened.
Tell me your thoughts about the process of putting this together, because not only are the photos great, but this is kind of like a miniature version of a coffee table book in that, and I mean
Right.
that in the best sense, right? Because some of the pages are full pictures, others are collages of different pictures, Others, there's descriptive things, but it's also the way you sectionalize this book. It's not just sort of just a longitudinal history from 1974 through whenever they died. You actually pull out and suss out individuals, teams, sideshow things, just things on the periphery, the field, those kinds of things. How did you? First of all, I guess number one is, how did you go through all the photos in the first place and not go down rabbit holes of time wasting and work not done, just to you get lost in all these pictures? And then number two, how did you set about what was your thinking about how to tell the story, so to speak, with all these pictures?
On your first point about the photos, it was an absolute joy scanning on these photos, and it was time consuming. There were about 5,000 photos that had to be scanned, probably more actually. But looking back at each one, it was almost like, is this going to be the golden ticket? Is this going to be the great photo that I hope to see? With each photo I scan, because it was like, again, going back in time and reliving something that was so fun. I mean, I went through wildly careening times. The earthquakes lasted pretty much my teen years. So, obviously, best of times, worst of times type situation, as it is probably for any teenager. But going to an earthquakes game, there was never anything bad about that. It was always just a joy to go to those games. And so looking at all those photos and scanning them all, and then in terms of cataloging them, that's what kind of dictated to me what I'm going to do with the book. I mean, just within what I had in mind for the book itself. In terms of putting the book together, I was thinking of two approaches. One was to either just do a full-on history of the team, interviewing everybody, and then kind of using the photos as a backstory. But first of all, that story had already been done by Gary Singh, who wrote a book on the earthquakes. It's really spent half his book talking about the earthquakes, the latter half talking about the current earthquakes of Major League Soccer. And he interviewed a lot of people, and that's more of a paperback kind of book, not so much a picture book like I have. And it's a good book. I think my book is actually complementary to his, and vice versa. But the other thought that I ended up doing was to go from memory, which is pretty photographic. I have a lot of very explicit memories of the time, and I remember a lot of the players. Remember their traits on the field, how their personalities were on and off the field. But I also had the backbone of all these soccer periodicals and materials that I had for years and years managed to keep. I had all these game programs. I had game programs from all the games we'd ever gone to, and they had information about the players and everything, which were very helpful. I had issues. I still have issues of Soccer America from that time. Defunct magazines now, Soccer Digest, Soccer Magazine. I have newspaper clippings. I was a huge earthquakes fan. I was just engorging in everything that I could keep at the time that was soccer related. Sports Illustrated, sport, anything that had to do with soccer, anything that put a story in soccer, I would cut out and keep it. And I still have all that. And so I used that as pretty much reference points for a lot of the information in the book. And yeah, in terms of the look of the book, yeah, I'm a graphic designer by trade, but I also like history. I love sports, especially soccer and baseball, as you know, at the thisgreatgame.com, which is the baseball history site I have. And I love writing, and it was just a combination of everything, putting the book together. I mean, it's a 200-page book, but I put it together fairly fast once I had kind of this rough script of all the photos I knew I had to choose from, and then the topics and how to kind of assemble those. Yeah, you're right. This is not so much a chronological book. Kind of sort of is, but but there's little like sidebar information, like the history of the NASL kind of butts in every once in a while. I kind of throw that in between, like the NASL in the early years, and then in its peak years, and then at the end, I kind of carefully tried to kind of wedge that into a lot of the earthquakes information as well.
But also the quirkiness of this team and the various things that made it go right. I'll just throw out a couple for your particular memories. But
Sure.
you talk about the Shakers, right? So to explain to us who the Shakers were. Just like every newfangled sports league in the United States, especially one that was featuring a largely quote unquote foreign concept type sport, always the attempt to Americanize it, right? And
Right.
the Quakes were no different in bringing their own cheer team, so to speak.
Yeah, the Shakers, I mean, they were. Remember, this was a time when the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders were suddenly become red hot popular. But they were more sex objects than cheerleaders. They had the halter tops and the tight shorts and everything. The Shakers were never like that. They were a little more wholesome. I think in part because the fan base at the Earthquake games were more family oriented, and they didn't want to anger anybody in that regard. But the Shakers, they were kind of like the ambassadors for the Earthquakes. They would go here, there, and everywhere to promote the team. And there's probably a good reason for that, because amongst my information, my research that I did, which I did not know at the time, but and during the research, I found out that the only salary they ever made was a 20% commission on season tickets they sold at functions and rallies and so forth that they were asked to attend. But they were always, they always were very complimentary to the pageantry that was going on before and during the game. One of our favorite things that they did, they always had these little skippy balls that they would about 4 or 5 inches in diameter, these little rubber balls that they would throw into the stands before a game and after the Earthquakes to score a goal. And we love those things because you could actually play with those in the backyard and kick the ball around. We had in our backyard in Saratoga these 2 posts right before the screen door, and we used that basically as a goal. So for me and my brother to go around and kick the ball around and stuff, and we had the Shakers to thank for that.
You have a bunch of different call outs, both directly and indirectly, to the field. People may remember, as they look back on pictures of the old Spartan Stadium, some interesting approaches to the on-field look. And I'm not sure the league, and certainly I know FIFA frowned upon it too, but the various markings that fans might have remembered. You want to maybe talk a little bit about some of those, because some of the photos, we can't really do it justice with words. You have to see sort of the photos of it, but there was some rationale, I think, there about. Well, you describe what the field looked like on a couple of different occasions.
Yeah, well, in 1976, John Carberry came over. He was the promotional guy in Portland for the team that's now recalled as the Battered Bastards of Baseball. That it's a film on Netflix. So like a lot of minor league baseball teams, very heavy and audacious on promotional angle. And so he came to the Earthquakes, and he followed Dick Berg, and who was labeled a promotional genius. And Carberry was pretty much one himself. He did a very good job with the Earthquakes as well. And the one really great thing he did was in 1976, which was probably my favorite year of all the years that the Earthquakes played, because it was they were winning, and they actually drew more fans on average than the stadium could hold. That's how good they were that year at Spartan Stadium. But what he did is he painted the field. He made the penalty area red. He made the arc and the goalie box black. He put a soccer ball painted into the
and not just a soccer ball, but a giant soccer ball.
Right? Yeah, the midfield circle was a big soccer ball. wasn't the most artistically done soccer ball. It was a little errant here and there, but it was still pretty cool to see that. And I thought it was a terrific thing. And yeah, I mean, FIFA back then was kind of backwards. Still probably, I don't know. I mean, they haven't done it since. Nobody has tried that since. Uh, and there's a great picture I have of it in the book. Dad took a full-fledged picture of the soccer ball into the field with the paint in black and white, but you could certainly see the grayscale at work there. Um, but yeah, it's fun. I mean, yeah, FIFA didn't like it. The New York Cosmos, when they came to town for the final game of that year, 25,000 people showed up at Spartan Stadium. Again, capacity 18,000. And they protested the painted field for what? I have no idea. I know maybe that they were worried that their jerseys were going to get all scarfed up in red and black. I don't know, but I'm sure it probably helped the referees in the time before VAR.
They probably even helped the
because
fans too to understand what the penalty areas versus the goal box versus,
absolutely
all that stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at the NFL; they put team logos at the 50-yard line. They deck out the end zones and everything. Why couldn't soccer do the same thing? It just puzzles me that that's never really been that never caught on. But for 1 year in San Jose, they did it.
How about indoor? We talked about it a little bit, but the indoor thing was a uniquely San Jose thing. Well, not just San Jose, right? They play the Cow Palace up in Oakland, but the Quakes were actually one of the original, one of the true originators of the indoor game back when the NASL did it sort of as a little one-off kind of winter kind of tournament thing, and then it obviously bloomed into a competitive league versus league situation. But the Quakes were always part of that, for better or for worse.
Right. Well, the NASL had indoor tournaments before the Earthquakes began play. I think in '73 and '74 they had indoor tournaments during the late winter months, early spring. Outdoor season never really started until May. But in '75, because of the success they had in '74, filling up Spartan Stadium, NASL decided to not only have San Jose host a regional tournament, the Cow Palace, but to also host the final tournament for all the winners of the regional tourneys. Yeah, and I write in the book that Cow Palace is kind of like the Spartan Stadium of arenas in the Bay Area. It's old, not very attractive looking. I mean, it does look like a cow palace if you look at it from the outside. The name is pretty apt. But San Jose didn't have an arena at the time either, too. I mean, nothing remotely close to being over 4,000 seats there. And so the Earthquake, and indoor soccer, we never heard of indoor soccer. We heard outdoor soccer, obviously. Everybody was playing it outdoors and everything, and all the kids were. But then to see this, soccer basically being played in a hockey rink kind of style thing, of course, not ice, of course, but artificial turf. That artificial turf too. I was on that field. I don't envy the players having to go out there and
the chicken wire for those first couple of years too. Paul Child told us about that, but literally having to help fix it and put it up sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it was a learning curve there, to be sure. And once the years came along, I think starting in '79 or '80, they got away with the tournament thing, and they just started a whole indoor season with the NASL. They started from October through February or March. It was almost as long as the outdoor season. And the Earthquakes at that time were playing at the Coliseum Arena in Oakland. And by then they kind of perfected it a little bit. You had the glass panes just like they do for hockey and stuff. And I think they had actually kind of changed out the goals. They made it more in a square shape. Originally in '75, when they first did the NASL tourney at the Cow Palace, it was more of this horizontal, not very tall. I think it was only like 4 feet off the ground. So it was an interesting way of trying to be a goalkeeper, trying to avoid goals from happening that way. Um, so, yeah, I never got so much into the indoor thing. I've played it actually before on the industrial league, and it's a lot of fun to play indoor soccer. But to me, it's the outdoor thing that's where it was at for me all the time.
All right, what's this? Oldschoolshirts.com. Fantastic. You've heard me talk on and on and on about the great folks and the great wares at oldschoolshirts.com. Like the name implies, it's old school and it's shirts, and they put them together, see, into what they call oldschoolshirts.com. It's like the name implies, but of course, we love them primarily for their sportswear. You name the league of the past, you name the team of the past, the chances are huge that they're going to have more than one shirt and different color schemes for things that you may remember from the United Football League or the Major Indoor Soccer League or various flavors of the original XFLs, plural, or the Federal League perhaps, or maybe World Team Tennis, or maybe it was the North American Soccer League, and on and on and on. But hey, it's not just sports. It's also great cultural touchstones and memories from the past. How about the officially licensed Evel Knievel connection? How about collection? Yeah, that's what he's trying to say. Various colleges. How about dead malls of the past? Ice cream parlors, maybe even radio stations that you might remember. Hey, even there's a latest edition of the now old, Aloha Stadium commemorative shirt. All that kind of stuff and more. You will find at least a handful of shirts that you will just transport you back into your past, and you will amaze and impress your friends at the same time. It's oldschoolshirts.com, and we got a promo code for you, of course. Let's save you some dough while you go there, and its promo code is Good Seats. Good Seats. That's the promo code at oldschoolshirts.com. Promo code Good Seats for 10% off all of your purchases. Hey, P.F. Wilson and your friends at oldschoolshirts.com, thank you for your sponsorship of the show. And now, back to our conversation. One of the things of this book that I loved was your section on, and I think this is probably, I learned a lot from this because this is not easily found anywhere else. And this was the rivalry, albeit only 1 year's worth, of this thing called the Oakland Stompers, right? Which a lot of people forget in 1978 was a 1 year, one hit, so to speak, wonder. But I think it's lost on a lot of people. And frankly, this was a revelation to me, just how the antipathy that went on between these two teams for just that one season. And I didn't even know the backstory of it. Maybe a little background for our audience who similarly might not know that.
Yeah, you had Johnny Moore on recently, and Johnny had a really good backstory that I didn't even know about. And in talking with him last summer, when we got together and he, after he found out about the book and was interested about it and so forth, he told me a lot of stuff too that I didn't even realize. But what I remember and what I wrote about is that the earthquakes, Milan Mandrich had kind of secretly kind of put out feelers at the end of the 77 season saying, I may buy another team, or I may move the Earthquakes to Oakland. There were both rumors were going. And then Dick Berg came along and said, I'm getting back together with Milan Mandrich at another place that will be determined. He was trying to keep it kind of this suspenseful little tidbit, little teaser. And then it turned out that they were moving the Connecticut Bicentennials, a team drawing 2,000 people in a 90,000 seat stadium in New Haven, Connecticut, to Oakland. And they were going to, Milan Mandrich was selling Earthquakes. He was going to take over that team. Dick Berg was going to be his general manager. So it was kind of like an early Earthquakes reunion. He was bringing on, some of the former Earthquake players. Johnny Moore went to Oakland. The whole story behind that, Johnny could tell better than I can. Mark Liverich who was a goal scoring machine for the Quakes in '76. He went there. John Rollins was there briefly. Um, and, of course, Dick Berg being Dick Berg, he not only promoted the hell out of the Oakland Stompers, uh, but he also was going to whip up this big rivalry with the Earthquakes. The Earthquakes are a little more laid back. He said, all right, whatever, you guys are this startup, and good luck to you. We're the established people. Um, the first game, the NASL did a really good thing. They scheduled the very first game between the Stompers and the Earthquakes of the '78 season for both teams against each other at the Oakland Coliseum. First game, at Oakland for the Stompers, and then the very last game would be back at Spartan Stadium between the two teams. Drew 32,000 for the first game at the Coliseum. Really good crowd, and Stompers won that in the blasted shootout, which well, I prefer ties, but if you're gonna do anything other than penalty kicks, I guess it would be the shootout. But after that, it's kind of a shame. I'll get back to that in a moment. But the very last game, both teams just had a terrible year. The Earthquakes especially. They had gotten off to a bad start, but at least they were competitive. But you got toward the end of the season, they were losing games by bunches of goals. They lost one game to Detroit Express 10-0, the most lopsided loss in NASL history. So when the Earthquakes and the Stompers played together against each other in the final game at Spartan Stadium, and they had a good crowd, mostly Earthquakes fans there. There were some Stomper fans there, but it was mostly an Earthquakes crowd. 17,000 people, Spartan Stadium. Both teams were just not very good at that point. The Earthquakes were just terrible. The Stompers got to a decent start, but they got worse as the season got on. They had coaching changes after coaching change, so forth. And the Stompers came to San Jose basically not so much to win, but to just stomp on the Earthquakes physically. So they're living up to their name, I suppose. It was a very violent game, very intense game, and the Earthquake fans were just really livid with how the Stomper players were acting and behaving toward the Quakes. And the Quakes scored two quick goals, which only made the Stompers even more upset. And it just got yellow card after yellow card was being given to the Stomper players. Two of them were ejected. And the atmosphere became as volcanic as I can ever recall at any Earthquakes game. I, for a while, thought there was going to be a full-blown riot at Spartan Stadium. The Earthquakes won the game 2-1. Cooler heads prevailed at the end. And the real shame, Tim, about that season was that both teams were so bad. Had it been the other way around, had they been really good, Stompers might have still been around, and you might have seen more of an evolution of that rivalry. But it just wasn't to be. It's just, fortunately, things didn't work out that way, and the Stompers were one and done. Johnny Moore told you Dick Berg had a family thing where I think his mom was very ill and he had to get out of soccer for a while. Milan Mandrick just, they were hoping to draw 20,000 a game. They drew 12,000, which was okay, but not what they'd wanted. He sold the franchise. The owner new owners moved it to Edmonton, where they became the Drillers. And then the Earthquakes had the whole Bay Area back to themselves. Mandrick, in fact, came back a year later and rebought the Quakes.
Yeah, that's crazy too, because you think about it. The success story that San Jose had for those 4 years prior to that,
Right.
and the fact that the league would, I don't know, I guess opportunistically try to cannibalize it so quickly after that, and this is a time when the league was still. I mean, I guess 1978 was a heady time because the NASL could do no wrong. The Cosmos were all that, and there are 24 teams, and every just thing, it seemed like blue sky ahead. And I think what was lost on a lot of people is that there are probably a lot of other markets, frankly, geographically more spread than by just going up the road by 50 miles. And I don't know, if San Jose is I mean, drawing, 17, 18,000 a game and as a great sort of like Green Bay type success story for the NASL, I don't know why you would want to injure that story by siphoning some of those fans off. I mean, was San Francisco and Oakland that different and separate that it could sustain another team, right? I don't know. You look back at it, it's kind of a head scratcher. I'm sure there were reasons, and I'm sure a lot of it had to do with scenarios that were playing around that weren't necessarily strategic, right? As you're mentioning, like, the bicentennials are available and, Berg's getting the itch again and, all that stuff. So I don't know. It just seems kind of crazy when you look back on it.
Yeah, I think what the NASL was hoping for was they were looking to see a rivalry develop, and that would kind of mushroom the whole community, the whole Bay Area.
Well, I'm sorry, they tried that with the LA Aztecs and the California Surf too. That's obviously was pushing the envelope a little bit too much too, right?
Right, and well, which was even worse because neither of those teams, well, the Aztecs certainly never really were drawing that great or really had them as intense an attraction as the Earthquakes were. So, I mean, you look at it too. I mean, in the 70s, I mean, it was hard. There were a lot of questions about whether Bay Area could even support two baseball teams, because either the Giants or the A's were really struggling at the time. One would do okay, and the other would just be totally in disarray, just financial disarray. And it got to the point where, well, maybe one of these teams need to leave. Of course, come the 80s, then things changed, and maybe a few more people moving into the Bay Area and people getting into sports. Of course, it helped too that everybody was winning in the Bay Area in the 80s outside the Earthquakes kind of drifting away. With the 49ers and the Giants and the A's and the Warriors doing pretty well. So, but yeah, back in Tim, you also hit on another point about the NASL not being very strategic. They really, it was this no guardrails approach to their league, and they did not do a very good job of kind of finding a way to nurture their success and sustain it. They were just hoping everybody would become the Cosmos and everybody would go out and buy all these pricey, soccer stars from Europe that were at the end of their careers. The Beckenbauers and Pele and Canale. Well, Canale was at the height of his game. He was kind of an outlier in that regard. But the thing about the NASL was that you had all these players coming, and they were making a lot of coin. Pele was making more money than any other athlete in the United States. When Johan Cruyff was signed by the LA Aztecs, who were drawing about 10,000 people a game and continued to draw 10,000 a game even after he came on board, he was the highest paid athlete in LA, even more than Kareem Abdul-Jabbar or Steve Garvey. So there's a lot of these players are getting paid a lot of really good money. There was some decent sponsorship within the NASL, but there was really no good revenue streams going, or there was, like I said, the NASL was not finding a really good way to sustain that and to build on that. It was just, here's 24 teams, everybody on your own, go for it. And you had teams like the Cosmos were drawing 50, 60,000 at Midlands. You'd have the Rochester Lancers who are drawing 7,000, 8,000, or Philadelphia Fury who's drawing 5,000 or 6,000. And you had teams in between who were doing well. Tampa Bay Rowdies obviously did very well. Minnesota Kicks briefly did very well. Portland and Seattle always were doing pretty well. Vancouver, but the problem with the NASL, there was just this structure of haves and have-nots.
Inconsistent. Yeah,
very inequitable, and that, I think, God, at some point the tipping point was going to be reached on that, and that's what necessitated. I mean, you had 24 teams, 78, 79, 80, and then with each passing year, 3 teams would drop out, 4 teams would drop out, and then by the time you got to 84, there were 9 teams left, and you just knew they just wasn't going to last much longer than that.
A couple other things I want to call out, because I truly encourage people to get this book. Even even if they weren't San Jose fans per se, but NASL fans or kind of if you really wanted to know, just kind of get a sense of what one of the most revered and stable teams in the league's history was like. How about one of our all-time best guests previously on this show, Crazy George?
Ah,
He probably got most of his credibility and his legacy from his time with the Quakes, most versus any other. I mean, he was nomadic over the years by going to all kinds of other teams and leagues and that kind of stuff. But I think he's probably most synonymous with the Earthquakes. No.
um, yeah, I would probably. I think he is probably more indebted to the earthquake experience than say his time with the A's or with any of the other teams. I mean, he's been a longtime supporter of San Jose State football, but it's San Jose State football is not exactly Alabama. Um, but he's still been pretty faithful to them. He actually got started with the California Golden Seals, the hockey team up in Oakland. And then he might have been at San Jose State first too, maybe before that. I'm kind of trying to hazy on which one was first. But yeah, with the earthquakes, he definitely became more of a phenomenon. And from there, he was able to leverage that to, well, the Stoppers briefly. Milan Mandrick also had Crazy George go with him to Oakland for 1 year. And then, of course, after all that, he came back to San Jose. But then he also did the Oakland A's when the Levi's folks took over the team from Charles Finley. And, suddenly they went from drawing 3,000 a game to 30, 40,000 a game at the Coliseum, which was incredible at the time. But Crazy George was there, and that's when he kind of stumbled upon the wave, which is kind of the roots of which had begun at San Jose when he just did it with had one section raise their hands up, then had the next section do it, and then had a third section do it, and that was it. Nobody ever thought to continue going around the stadium, which they could have done at Spartan Stadium. With the Coliseum, I guess he did the same thing, and then one day all the other sections just started doing it because, hey, we want to be in on this, and then he just went around the stadium, and there you go. It's the wave. Of course, other people insist that they created the wave. I think University of Washington said that they were there doing it before Crazy George was. But yeah, he was like, the thing with it must have been so fun to be in the Earthquake front office every week before a home game and figure out how are we going to introduce Crazy George this week? Are we going to get him to come out of a box? Are we going to fly in a helicopter? Are we going to, have him, dress up as a Mountie because the Whitecaps are in town or something like that. So that was always a fun bit before the game. That again added to the pageantry.
I had heard that Rob Weller, ex of Entertainment Tonight, he had laid claim to that from his University of Washington days. I don't know, but look, anybody the wave, yeah. I think anybody who is familiar or remembers sports in the 70s and the 80s. I mean, there was the San Diego Chicken, and then there was Crazy George Henderson. I mean, these were the two kind of like iconic, sideline showpieces, if you will. And he was great. I mean, George was terrific. I'd love to have him back on the show. His memory is sharp, and his not as much as his voice. Sadly, I think he's kind of thrown out his voice, but for good reason. He's given his voice to great causes, and the Earthquake certainly
He's always had a gravelly voice.
Yeah, well, I know, but I mean, I think he just feels to me like he's synonymous with his friends, and this is the craziness, and these pictures of him and all the different wild things that he did, just absolutely. All right, before we cul-de-sac this, you also, of course, with great dexterity, have a lot of great tribute to a whole big number of players that played on the team. I think people know some of the bigger names, by heart. We've talked about some of them, but aside from the names like Paul Child or You mentioned Mark Liverich. I mean, Paul Child and what about some of the players maybe that folks may not remember as much, or perhaps stood out to you being worthy of remembrance or of special note? Certainly, there was George Best, right, with his
Yeah.
very famous best goal of all time. But what about some of the other ones?
Well, yeah, there are a lot of good players that came in with the earthquake. Some of them stuck around for a long time. Mike Hewitt was there from 76 through, I think, 82, maybe even 83. I think he was the longest serving earthquake, the goalkeeper, Mike Hewitt. Yeah, there were a lot of good players. Unfortunately, their time in the earthquakes wasn't very long. The one I wish had stuck around a little bit more, for whatever reason, he was gone after 1 year, was Julie V. I don't
Sure.
know if you remember Julie V. He was terrific, Eastern European born, escaped from behind the Iron Curtain, came to the US, um, was going to adopt the name Julie V with VEE, and somebody told him, no, that's Bobby V is VEE. You got to add another E to your last name. So it was V followed by three E's. And now he goes by Julie V without the E after Julie. So he's Juli. But anyway, when he was playing for the Earthquake, he played 1 year for the Earthquakes, so really half the season. That was the 76 season, which was, again, my favorite year. And the one where they ended up one game short of the Soccer Bowl. Um, but he was a tremendous playmaker, loved his ability. Unfortunately, he tore up his knee midway through the year and never was able to come back. And then I think he was off the next year. He went to the San Diego Sockers, um, became a really great indoor player. So Julie V is one I missed. I wish he'd hung around more, stuck around more. Um, and I wish we had seen more of Steve Zongo earlier. Steve Zongo, who was just a goal scoring machine in the last several years with the Earthquakes. And this guy, I read the story and I mentioned it in the book. This guy went on to play indoors. He scored 652 goals indoors in his career, which is just a mind-boggling amount of goals if you think about it.
Oh, the Lord of all
Uh,
endures. Yeah.
yeah, but he scored quite a few outdoors too. Not quite 652, but
But when
um,
he moved to when was then now the became the Golden Bay Earthquakes. I mean, he actually
yeah,
he brought his indoor prowess with him, but he also, I think, led the league outdoors that one season, or maybe two seasons, one season for sure. I think Branca Segota was also on the team too that one of those years.
yeah. No, there's um, both of those guys paired up well, and of course that was a really good team, especially I think in '83. Again, and if I mentioned the book, rooting on the Earthquakes in '83, which probably their very best year period in terms of the record. But there was it was set against the backdrop of this rapidly shrinking NASL. And as I say in the book, rooting on the '83 Quakes was like partying on the Titanic after the iceberg was struck. um and but that was a great team. They had not just those two guys, but they also had Leonardo Cuellar, the great Mexican player. They had Chris Dangerfield, who had been around the NASL forever, was a rookie for the '75 Portland Timbers, who went on to the Soccer Bowl, which was played at Spartan Stadium against Tampa. He eventually joined the Earthquakes in the early '80s. Um, and of course, they had Godfrey Ingram still. He was an Englishman who came over, I think, in '82 and stuck around for a couple of years and was a really good player. So they had a lot of good goal scoring offensive talent at that time. And it was fun to watch that team. They didn't lose a game at home that whole year in '83. They were 15-0 at home. So that also made it fun to go back to the games. And the crowds weren't quite as large as they were back in the heyday, but they were still large enough. I was thinking about the Earthquakes. They never really drew poorly, even when they were, and they lost a lot. That's the thing. They had a couple of really good years, but mostly they lost a lot of games. But they always had this really good base of support. They rarely drew under 10,000. They almost always had at least 10,000, even toward the end. Um, but um, but it was a testament, I think, to the Earthquakes that they were able to carry on as long as they did and still have great fan support, even if they didn't really play that well or win that many games.
No, there was always an intimidating place to play. There's no question about that
Oh
too.
yeah,
I remember
absolutely.
watching those
And I
Cosmos games, on tape delay in New York, and the friendly confines, if you will, the narrowness of the field, and the how close the fans were and that kind of stuff. I was jealous slash reviled by that
Yeah,
environment on television versus what I was getting at Giant Stadium, right? But
yeah, well, yeah, at least you had crowds of 60,000 there. But yeah, no, Spartan Stadium. Yeah, visiting teams were definitely intimidated, and conversely, the home player, the Quakes players, they were heavily energized by the fans. I don't bet you can't find anybody who ever played for Earthquakes that said, "Oh, I hated playing there." I bet you they all to a man probably said, "We loved the experience."
well, the experience that I love was going through this book, and I've looked at it at least 5 or 6 times now, and I still discover little interesting things. But I guess let me ask you this one last question. Um,
Sure.
I take it that your dad did not obviously did not get to see this book come to fruition. I
No.
uh, I gotta think that he would be more than proud with the output of this book, because I didn't know the guy, but my goodness, I mean, these pictures are, I mean, the story that you weave with this, I feel like I was part of that Earthquakes experience in the mid 1970s, and I got to think he's looking down, saying, "Man, son, you did me well here. You did me some solids," because not only the photography but the way this stuff is put together. This is probably one of the best uh, uh, I don't know, storytelling books that I've seen about a particular team in our little genre. I think in the 6 or 7 years I've been doing this show. So the only thing I wish is that there were more of them. That's all. But I mean,
Well, the great.
how do you feel with the output? Because I cannot encourage people enough to get a copy of this book, because again, truly, in my mind, if you wanted to get a sense of what it was like in the NASL in the mid 70s, and in particular this franchise in San Jose, which was unique and special, and I didn't even grow up there, so I'm not even saying it as somebody who lived through it. This is that book, and then some.
Yeah, one of the goals of the book was to have the reader place the reader as best I could get him or her to be in that time and place, to make them know what it must have been like to be there, and the pictures and the design of the book and just the description and the writing. Again, I just had an absolute joy putting this book together, writing it, designing it, producing it, scanning the photos, acquiring doing the research on it all, because this is all stuff I already knew quite a bit about, but then going back and looking at all the periodicals and stuff and kind of getting that extra information, all that stuff put together into this book. And one of the things, Tim, is that I have a saying, this is not my first book, and I often say, if there's a book I want out there that I can't find, I'll do it myself. And this is one of those books. I really, and I don't know, maybe agree or disagree with me on this. I think the history of books on NASL, the number of books out there on the NASL, on the history, uh, have been kind of underwhelming. We haven't
Agreed.
really seen. I have not seen hardly. There's been a couple that have been about the NASL, but they have not. And I haven't, honestly, I have not read them. But the reviews I've read about them were not very kind. Um,
Could you ever see yourself doing, if you had the raw materials to do it? Could you ever see yourself doing a book about the NASL overall, assuming you had access to the trove of stuff and then some that your dad left you for this one?
Yeah, I'd have to kind of tap into other photographic sources and other research materials on that. It's a shame we
Because
don't
that's
have
a book
Phil.
that needs to be done, with all due respect. I mean,
It is.
there's a documentary needs to be, MISL, same thing. There's a ton of stuff that look, the people who listen to this show vibe with me a lot on this stuff. And frankly, some of the topics don't warrant it. This one certainly does. This book that you've done and the earthquake story certainly, but the NASL certainly does. The MISL certainly does. World Football League. I mean, there's the ABA. I mean, there's a lot of these, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but I can tell you this format is it's terrific. And I think you could apply it to some other stories in our little realm of sports, forgottenness, should you ever want to. That's how supremely well put together I think this book is.
Yeah, no, I agree with pretty much everything you say there. I think again, going back to the baseball history site, I have thisgreatgame.com. I know baseball history backwards and forwards. And I think NASL history is kind of on a par with the dead ball era of baseball, which was,
That's funny,
lasted
sure.
basically from 1900 to 1920. Over 100 years ago. It's certainly a lot longer than NASL. But the great thing about the dead ball era in baseball was it was full of colorful teams, colorful characters. Again, the black and white photos can only take you so far, but just the stories you read about, what was going on then and so forth. It was just a wild time, almost reckless. Of course, it all peaked, or for lack of a better word, with the Black Sox scandal. But I kind of think of the NASL as kind of the dead ball era of pro soccer in this country. And I think it's an absolute shame that Major League Soccer is turning its back on the NASL. Johnny Moore and all the other earthquake players, to a man, they all say the same thing. MLS doesn't want anything to do with the NASL. They did not like that the earthquakes were the earthquakes. They did not like that it was the Portland Timbers, Seattle Sounders, Vancouver Whitecaps going back to their heritage and renaming those teams after the old NASL teams. I would love to have MLSL speak on the subject on that at some point. They were a little weird with me when I was trying to get permission on one photo that the earthquake said I need to get permission from them to do. I don't know, maybe they have anathema to NASL because the other NASL, the tier 2 team right now that is in court against MLS and US Soccer, maybe there's a connection there that, they don't really, they just don't like the acronym NASL. I don't know. But I think it would be very smart at some point soon, that MLS look back on their heritage of pro soccer in this country and look back in the NASL, embrace it the way Major League Baseball has embraced the Negro Leagues, the way that, the NFL has embraced other football leagues of the time, and, their eras, and the NBA and NHL too, all that. History is rich, and it only makes what you have now richer. And I think it'd be a big mistake if MLS continues to turn its back on the North American Soccer League, the original North American Soccer League, and the history of it.
Amen, brother. I think I think there is a fear of of being tarred, or any memory of the failure of the league right back in the day. And
MLS is they took a totally different approach from NASL. They knew what ruined the NASL.
Well, that's the
How
irony of
ruined
it.
itself.
That's the irony. They learned the lessons, and without those first lessons, you might not have MLS, frankly.
Right. Yeah, they took a much more socialist approach to their league. They had owners owning multiple teams and stuff like that, which I didn't really like. And of course, now it's one team per one owner. But MLS has come a long way. God bless them. 30 teams. They almost all of them have their own stadiums now. They're doing great, and I root for them. I hope they do well. I hope they go on to par with Premier League and all the other big 5 leagues in Europe at some point. They have the money to do it. I wish they would take that next step.
No, I agree, and that's why we love to celebrate stories like this, and certainly works of art like this. This book is, and we'll promote the heck out of it before and after and during when we release the episode and stuff. But I also love the fact that this is also a personal story for you and your dad's hobby, if you will. How fortunate are we, and you in particular, but us generally, to be able to have this record that you so lovingly put together as a testament to what the Earthquakes were and what the league was back in the day, and truly a keepsake of what was going on at the time. That's why we do these shows, I think. Some of it's just curiosity and just the craziness of the various stories and like what were people thinking, and but
Right.
it gets personal sometimes. It gets there's some people who still harbor grudges or have some of their best memories from some of the people that they related to or were part of, or teams that they were. All this stuff it's all part of it, and I think this book is absolutely fantastic. I cannot hype it enough, and I wish you nothing but a success and then some. And I pray, frankly, not just people in the San Jose and Bay areas, but soccer fans of any sort, both current who don't know enough about the NASL, or frankly people who were around during the time. This is as much a story about that as it is about the particular Earthquakes team.
Yeah, and I think to that point, I don't think this should be pigeonholed as a regional book. This really does talk about, it's obviously focused on the Earthquakes, but it does tell the larger story about the NASL. And I think anybody who, didn't follow the Earthquakes back then, but may have been an NASL fan, they're going to get a kick out of this book. I think anybody who wasn't there at the time going to get a kick out of this book. It's going to be an eye opener for them, because again, this is history that a lot of these people have no idea about, and they should, because it's been kind of hidden, to be honest, over the last 30, 40 years. And I do sense now that it is starting to become more of you're starting to feel more of a buzz, a vibe about the NASL. I hope that grows and continues.
All right, I can't tell you how much I enjoyed not only this conversation, but this book. I have raved about other books in the past, but this one rises to the top pretty quickly because it's just so well produced and professionally done. And again, if you are an NASL soccer fan, generally you're just intrigued about what life was like on the field in the 1970s in this country, or you grew up in the Bay Area and were a fan of the Earthquakes, or even the Oakland Stompers for that 1 year in 1978, you owe it to yourself to get the Johnny Moore forwarded book that we just talked about, Our Life and Times with the Earthquakes, Images and Memories from the Glory Days of San Jose's Original Pro Soccer Team. The author of it was our guest this week, Eric Gouldsberry, photography by his father, Ray, and you probably can get it the most inexpensive way and the quickest way by going to our website at Good Seats, still available. All you got to do is search up this episode. It's number 383 in your program, and you'll find a couple of convenient links to Amazon, and you will get it as quickly and as cheaply as humanly possible. When you do so, we get a couple of shekels of referral love, and we love that for sure. That helps keep our lights on and more great programs coming your way. So thank you for doing that, and I think Eric will thank you as well. And I trust me, you will enjoy this book. It is that well done. I have my personal guarantee on that. You can also follow other adventures of Eric. As I said at the outset of the show, Eric is a professional graphic designer and a creative guy by trade. He can be found on his website, his professional doings there at Gouldsberry. That's GOULDSBERRY.com, Gouldsberry.com. His nickname there is EGAD. It's Eric Gouldsberry Art Direction, and lots of great stuff. And you can see why he was so expert at putting this book together. You can also follow, actually check out his other awesome site in the realm of baseball, for goodness sakes. A lot of oldie time baseball memories and stuff, also graphically well done as a website. That's called thisgreatgame.com, established in 2005. Mind you, thisgreatgame.com. worthy of a bookmark there. Lots of great stories and reminiscences and anecdotes and fun factoids and all those kinds of things to supplement your love of the great game of baseball, ballparks and the like. So check that out. You can also follow Eric on various socials. You can follow him on the X Twitter thing at USMNT, as in U.S. Men's National Team, win WC soon. That's at USMNT, win, WIN, WC, as in World Cup, soon, SOON, at USMNT, win WC soon. If you can figure that out, you can follow him on the X Twitter thing. You can also follow him at This Great Game, also on the Twitter X thing. And I believe you can also check out This Great Game on the Blue Sky as well. While you're on the socials, why don't you make sure you've got us in your various feeds and stuff. We are most active on Blue Sky. Where you find us there at goodseatsstillavailable.com. We are almost as active on the Twitter X thing for the time being, although we'll probably start to dissipate some of that sooner rather than later, and that's you'll find us there at Good Seats Still. You'll find us at the various other socials, including YouTube, by the way, where we post this show in addition to all your various podcast feeds at Good Seats Still Available. You'd like to send us some email, by all means, please do so. We're at hello@goodseatsstillavailable.com. And thank you, of course, to Jerry Payne, who painstakingly, once again, pushing the envelope on that turn of phrase there, puts all our pieces together this week, and he has not complained yet. And we're 7 years and counting, so we're going to do our best to not upset him too much further. But thank you, kind sir, for all of your knob twiddling this week. And of course, to you, our wonderful listeners, thanks for listening, as always, and more to come your way. Just keep check out on your feeds. Make sure your friends are following us too. Tell a friend and have them tell a friend, and so on and so on. Let's grow the show even further, and more great stuff coming your way. Have a good week, everybody.